All right, fantastic. So thank you guys so much for coming. And if you have any questions as we go along, you can type them in the chat. You can also type them in the Q&A section. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Chelsea. I am the co-founder of SoStocked.com, and we are going to talk about inventory planning. Okay, fantastic. So I am assuming that you can see my screen. This is the Inventory Planning to Win 2020 webinar. And a little bit about myself. I have been an Amazon seller since 2014. I have been a speaker, a consultant, and a copywriting expert specifically for the Amazon platform. So been working with 6, 7, and 8-figure sellers to help them to maximize their conversion rate. And so that was kind of where my forte was. But around 2018, I started noticing that a lot of my money was being tied up in inventory mistakes, either over ordering or under ordering and stocking out. And so I decided that I had to kind of get a handle on that. So what I then did was decided to dive into inventory management, right? So I had all these problems. I had stock outs. I had, over ordering, taking out loans to do large orders and then not being able to sell through them. All of these types of things that were occurring based on bad data. Type into the chat if this sounds like something familiar to you and to your business, especially probably 2020. That's probably been the most difficult year for inventory management that we have had in a long time. So anyway, I ended up meeting Dan Fernandez. Dan Fernandez is the founder of Thomason.com. I knew that I needed to solve my inventory problems. I was looking for software. The softwares that I was trying, they weren't working out. So I wanted to find someone who could help me to build a system that would actually work the way that a seller's mind works, right? And would be able to automate the inventory process, speed it up, make it faster, and make it more accurate. And so Dan had a lot of experience with software development. He had a successful company in Thomason.com. And so we partnered up, and, from that point, we've been basically just diving into inventory management. We've looked at, tons of software. We've talked to hundreds of sellers and really isolated what it is that works in inventory management and what doesn't work in inventory management, and what are the best practices for inventory management. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So let's talk about the common inventory mistakes. And again, if you have any questions about things as we go along, feel free to go ahead and type something in the chat, and we will get going. All right, so there are basically 3 common inventory mistakes. There's a bunch of different reasons for these mistakes, but there are 3 main ones, right? And the first one being under ordering, right? Not ordering enough, not really predicting enough sales. And there's a couple of different reasons for that, but the main reason is simply that you're operating off of bad data, right? And that, for example, could be something like you forgot that you stocked out last year, right? Last Christmas, you had 6,000 units worth of sales. And so you're looking at last year's sales, and you're going to basically try to duplicate it for this year so that you can order enough to get you through the Christmas holiday. However, if you did not remember that you stocked out for a week of last Christmas, then you would have lost sales. So your actual potential would perhaps be over 7,000 units, and that's the order that you should be placing. So if you are using last year's data and you're not factoring out those stock outs, you're going to potentially make the same mistake twice, and you're going to be stocking out this coming season. So using the total number of sales for a time period is not necessarily the most accurate way to do your forecasting. Still, it's something that people are constantly doing, is looking at their total number of sales and not really getting granular enough with the data. All right, the next one is over ordering. So over ordering is kind of the other side of that same coin. And a lot of times it can be because you have bad data, right? For example, Perhaps last fall you were featured as one of the back to school products that everyone has to have, and you were on a news segment where you ended up generating a ton of extra sales because your product was somehow found and grabbed and mentioned on this news station. This is something that happened to us, and we made a ton of sales for a short period of time. So these are things that can happen, is that you've got some sort of one-off event that occurs that boosts your sales. And then a year goes by and you forget that that happened, and you go again and grab the total number of units to sell for that period of time. And you don't factor out that huge sales spike into the equation. You end up over ordering, right? In this example, the excess inventory being 3,000 units of additional inventory. And that can hurt your cash flow and tie up your capital and keep you from being able to order your other products as you need them. And then of course there's storage units and things like, or storage fees and things like that. All right, and then the last one is cutting it too close. So simply not ordering on time. This is a sign that you don't have your systems in place. And a lot of times this can be tied to your cash flow, because you know when you're getting paid, and you know that you're going to have to pay your supplier. So you're really kind of maybe putting it to the last second to place that order, because cash flow wise, it's a little bit difficult for you, right? Either that, or you're extremely busy and you're working on a ton of other things, and inventory is one of those things at the back of your mind and the back of your plate. And then you end up ordering too late because you don't have a system in place to look at your inventory, say on a weekly basis, and make those decisions and place those orders on time. So those are the basic 3 reasons why people have inventory problems, right? There's a bunch of different nuances to why these things happen, but those are the main 3: over ordering, under ordering, and then cutting it too close, right? You ordered the right amount, but you didn't order it on time, and it got to the warehouse too late, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Amazon's IPI bomb. This is something that that threw a wrench in all of our systems, right? 2020, a lot of people had trouble with this. Amazon had announced that they were dropping the threshold for the inventory performance index, which is basically Amazon's way of looking at how well you're managing your inventory at FBA. So what they did is they actually decreased the threshold. They increased the threshold, and they decreased your ability to send in inventory if your score was below 500, right? This was a huge problem for people, but then we noticed that it wasn't only for people who had a lower score, it was actually for everybody. Everybody had a specific limiter on their inventory. So that's something new that has to be contended with. That's something to keep in mind. And that's something that we've actually incorporated in the SoStock software, which I will show you. A lot of these principles you can do on a spreadsheet. I'm going to be showing them on the SoStock software, but if you're still on spreadsheets and you're not yet at the point of transitioning, some of these things you can do on a spreadsheet. Of course, as your business grows and as you scale, it becomes more and more important to get a good system in place that's more automated and takes up less of your time. All right, so we talked a little bit about an IPI score. The IPI score is the Inventory Performance Index score, and it's the way that Amazon basically calculates and rates your specific performance in terms of how good you are at managing your inventory, right? So the main factors are stranded inventory, excess inventory, sell-through, and in-stock inventory. Now, as we are going to go into best practices, which is one of the next things we're going to talk about, a lot of the best practices have to do with handling these aspects of things, helping you to stay in stock, helping you to avoid excess inventory, helping you to increase your sell-through rate, which means how fast your inventory actually turns over, right? From the moment that you send a batch of inventory in, how quickly can you sell through that batch before you need to send more inventory in, right? A good sell-through rate might be, selling through a total batch of inventory in 30 days or 60 days. Bad sell-through rate would be that you don't sell through that batch for 6 months, for example, or a year. That's a bad sell-through rate. All right, so we're going to really quickly talk about the inventory management best practices. And I'm going to basically point out, see, these are some of the things that you should have in place that you should be using inside of your inventory systems. And I'm also going to point out just some of the key, most important ones that if you were to just to do, you know, one or two things as you start to build out your inventory management systems, what are those few things that you should get in place right away? All right, so let's talk about adjusted velocity. So we did the example showing how it can be detrimental if you look at the total number of sales that you have made over a period of time, right? Because if you have a stock out or if you have a sales spike, you can get into some trouble by miscalculating, by not removing that. Right. This is something that we've seen Amazon do. Amazon, when they're calculating how much inventory you should send in, once you stock out, they actually don't adjust the calculation to account for that stock out. And so you're being told that you can send in less inventory when you stock out based on the fact that you don't have inventory, you're selling less units for that time period. So Amazon doesn't have this right. And we've seen how it's been detrimental to some businesses because Amazon's not using what we call adjusted daily velocity. So I'm going to show you how adjusted daily velocity works. Okay, so this is our forecast. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into the velocity. And what I want you to notice is we've got a couple of different ways to calculate velocity. So for example, let's take this 30-day velocity. Let's grab one that's got a little bit more. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So let's take, for example, this 30-day velocity. So this 30-day velocity is being calculated. If I had a stock out, it would eliminate that portion of the stock out. So for example, if I was stocked out 10 out of the last 30 days, it's going to look at the 20 days that I'm in stock, right? So that's very important. If it's not calculating that, that period of time, then I'm going to be getting into some trouble, right? So if you go into this section, you'll see there are stock out days, and all of these stock out days are being removed. So this product has, you know, stocked out a little bit during this last year. You can see that, and it's being removed. And I can decide whether or not I want to eliminate those stock outs or not. But stock outs are very important to eliminate so that you actually get a true idea of what your velocity is. Sales spikes would be another one to potentially factor in. A sales spike you might want to factor in a sales spike on instances, for example, that are not going to repeat themselves. For example, in October of 2020, we had Prime Day, but Prime Day is now going to be towards the middle of the year. So we don't want to necessarily factor Prime Day into October again this year. So we would want to remove that from our sales spikes. All right. Okay, let me go ahead and jump back in. Okay, so that's adjusted velocity. Adjusted velocity is an extremely important tool to have in your arsenal. And it is really the tool that helps you to figure out, like, what would you sell if you hadn't had this strange anomaly occur? All right, so adjusted velocity uses averages. It doesn't use monthly total sales, right? It uses the true average of your in-stock days. The other options you can use is you can use last year's sales, and we do have the ability to calculate last year's sales into our equation, right? We can use last year's sales, which also eliminate the stock out days. Then you want to remove sales spikes. You want to remove stock outs. You want to remove deep discounts if you're doing any deep discounts. And then you potentially want to put a growth trend in there if you are having, say, month over month growth, or if you're looking at last year's sales and you know that you've grown from last year to this year. Using a growth trend would be an important way to go. So you have to adjust your forecast for your true velocity. All right, then I want to talk about buffer stock. So buffer stock is something where if you only did one or two things from this webinar, buffer stock would be one of those things, right? It's basically a safety stock. It's kind of like a false zero. So it's kind of like when you're driving in your car and you're going to run out of gas, the gas light comes on to warn you to go fill up your gas tank. It doesn't come on and then you are stalled on the side of the road. It comes on with enough time for you to get to the gas station to fill up your gas. So that's kind of what buffer stock is. It's this alert that comes that says you need to order, and it schedules out your order so that your inventory arrives early enough so that you don't run out of stock. For example, if you set it at 250 units, you would be told to order so that your inventory arrives when it hits 250 units, not when you hit 0. Right. So inside of our system, that would work in this way. Okay, so you've got a buffer stock. So let's look here. So the buffer stock works in either units or days, and it's going to allocate an additional amount of inventory that it doesn't want you to sell through, right? You're always going to keep a certain amount in stock so that if anything goes wrong, you have that little bit of cushion, right? So we can say, 300 units is our buffer stock and we don't want to go below 300, or we can say 30 days worth of stock, for example. So you can do it in number of days. In number of days is recommended because it'll fluctuate based on your velocity. So, 30 days worth of stock on a low period, maybe you're selling 10 units a day and 300 units is fine, right? So you'll have 300 units of stock for that 10 units a day. That's a whole 30 days of stock. But then on, say, your high season, you start selling 30 units a day. Well, all of a sudden that 300 units is no longer 30 days worth of stock. It's only 10 days worth of stock. So you want to make sure that it fluctuates so that 30 units then is 900, or 30 days worth of stock is 900 units, right? So it's important to be able to be flexible and for your buffer stock to fluctuate along with what's happening with your inventory. Okay. So here's some guidelines for buffer stock. So these are some important guidelines to know. The longer your lead time or transfer time, the higher your buffer stock should be, okay? So that means that the more things that can go wrong, the more important it is that you have a high buffer stock. If you're sending inventory from, from somewhere in the United States to somewhere in the United States, that could be, say, 7 days, 10 days worth of lead time. It might not be extremely important to have a very high buffer stock, but if you're sending from China and it could take, say, 90 days to get there, you could have things like, problems with your factory. You could have warehouse problems. You can have shipping problems. You can have, a hurricane off the coast of China. All of these different things, getting stuck in customs, all these different things could potentially slow down the process of receiving your inventory. So you want to have a longer buffer, a higher buffer stock to account for that longer lead time and the more possibility of things going wrong. Setting your buffer stock in days, like I said, is recommended over setting it in units. And we already talked about that. And then I would also consider having a buffer stock that is for FBA and a separate buffer stock for your warehouse. And that's something that we program into the software as well. So that just gives you a double cushion, right? You have a cushion at Amazon and you have a cushion at your 3PL. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is considering the buffer stock and how inventory impacts the Amazon algorithm. This is an important thing to note. It's something that has been being talked about in the community, though not everyone has heard about it, something called geo-ranking. And basically Amazon they have a couple of promises that they make to the customer. They don't promise them anything about your product. They don't promise them that your product is going to be good. All they promise is that if they don't like the product, or if there's a problem, there will be a refund or a replacement or some other way of helping to solve that that dispute. And then they also promise that they've got this thing called prime shipping, right? 2-day prime, sometimes 1-day prime. We've seen, you know, people lose their 1-day prime badges because they don't have enough inventory available to meet that 1-day prime deadline. The same types of things are happening with 2-day prime. Amazon wants to be able to meet that 2-day prime deadline. So if you don't have enough inventory dispersed throughout the country, it's possible that Amazon will start to lower your ranking in the different parts of the country that you're short on inventory. And so that can affect your sales velocity. Just not having enough inventory on hand can affect your sales velocity. They also might not award you the PPC ads, right? So if you're competing for the same ads that your competitor is, and your competitor has a ton of inventory dispersed properly throughout the country, it's more likely that Amazon wants to award him the sale as opposed to you, because he is more likely to be able to, they're more likely to be able to deliver his goods to the end buyer at the appropriate time for that 2-day prime shipping. So something to keep in mind, buffer stock is very, very important, and it's important not to have too little buffer stock, right? A good rule of thumb for private label would be, say, 30 days of buffer stock. And for wholesale, it's a little bit different because you're not competing in terms of, like, there's ranking challenges, but there's more sellers selling that same product. So the ranking won't be as adversely affected if more people who are selling that product still have that inventory available, even if you don't. So you could get away with, say, something like 10 days worth of buffer stock for a wholesale business. You can also keep your cash flowing in that instance. All right, I do see we have a question. Let me go ahead and open up for the questions. Can you please explain a little bit about what is the difference between FBA buffer stock and warehouse buffer stock? Sure, yeah, let me go ahead, and I'm going to actually jump into our website to explain that. Okay, here we go. Okay, good. So we've got warehouse buffer stock and FBA buffer stock. So the warehouse buffer stock would be how much inventory you want to keep at your warehouse at all times, and the FBA buffer stock would be how much you want to keep at Amazon at all times. So I can apply this to this product. And so what it's going to do is it's going to try to keep my buffer stock here at FBA. So when I go to sell through, let's see. So if I'm selling, you know, let's see, what is it? About half a unit every other day, my 30 days of buffer stock is going to be about 15 or so units. So it's going to tell me to ship inventory in so that when my inventory arrives to FBA, I'm still above that 15 units a day, right? And then, of course, you've got the similar thing going on with your warehouse inventory. The warehouse inventory, let's see, we've got plenty of warehouse inventory, so it's not showing up here. It would be the same thing. So if I wanted to have 30 days worth of warehouse inventory, the system would not let me go below that same 15 units a day to be able to calculate. So it's going to tell me to send inventory to my warehouse in enough time so that it actually arrives before I run out of that 15 units of inventory, or those 30 days worth of inventory at my warehouse. So it's always, so it's basically you're adding just a little padding that's being kept at your warehouse and a little padding that's being kept at FBA. So everything, when you're making your orders and your transfers, it's keeping those things in mind. Hopefully that explains it. Let me know if you need more clarification on that. I'm happy to do so. All right, let's go ahead and let's see. Okay, fantastic. Okay, good. So we're gonna go ahead and do a new share. Okay, good. So we've gone over the buffer stock guidelines. The next thing I wanted to talk about is min-max restocking. And part of this factors in the buffer stock being your minimum. But this is just something that basically you set a high and a low range for stocking, right? It makes it easy to know when to order, how much to order. It also helps to systemize things so that you can actually eventually pass this inventory task on to somebody else. One of the reasons why people have a hard time passing this task on to other people is because they're always doing it by gut feel. They say, okay, they've got everything in their heads and they are doing it just by kind of what they think they need, and they never systemize it. So this helps to systemize and streamline that technique. So let me go ahead and show you how that works. Sorry. All right. So first of all, the min-max restocking, the reason that this came about, I was actually touring a warehouse, and this warehouse, basically they produce a lot of print on demand. So they have huge vats of ink, they have huge rolls of paper that they feed through these machines, and I was talking to them about their reordering, and this is what they were telling me. They were basically had everything on weighted systems. And so when the ink got depleted to a certain weight, they would get an alarm or an alert that would tell them that they needed to reorder, and they needed to reorder to get to the maximum weight. And then they'd use the ink through to the minimum weight, and then they'd reorder stock to the maximum. And then they would keep doing that. And so it was min-max restocking. So that's something that we've pulled into the software. We've put this into SoStocked, and it's made things very easy to kind of navigate, right? So if you were to go to your transfer schedule, you can transfer, say, I want to transfer every week, every 2 weeks, and that's fine. But a lot of people were basically saying they transfer as needed. Whatever is needed, they just want to know when to transfer based on what's happening, right? So we say, okay, let's say 30 days worth of buffer stock, right? My minimum is 30 days and my maximum, let's say, is 90 days, right? I never want to have more than 90 days. So if that's the case, the rest of that inventory could go to your warehouse, but you would be ordering 90 days worth of stock, selling all the way through to 30 days, and then restocking back up to 90 days. So you're always staying within that range, right? And it could be whatever you want. Maybe it's 60 days. Maybe for some businesses, it's 60 days of max stock, 30 days, or for a wholesale, it might be 45 days of max stock and 10 days of buffer stock. It just happens to have to do with what your particular business model is and what works for you and for your cash flow. All right. So and this is where we'll get back to the IPI limits. When you set these amounts, this will help you to increase your sell-through. So if you're having a hard time with your sell-through rate, and your sell-through rate score on your IPI score is the thing that's dragging you down, change this and narrow the amount of inventory you're sending in, and send less inventory in more frequently, and that will automatically increase your sell-through rate, right? You can also use the IPI limit. We have IPI limit. We have the max ship quantity pulled in on a daily basis to be able to tell us how much inventory we're allowed to send. How much is Amazon allowing us to send into the warehouse, right? So it's going to pick whatever is less. So in this case, 60 days is less than the max ship quantity for this product, right? So it's going to choose 60 days. But if the IPI limit was at, say, 40 days, then it would pick the IPI limit. It would only allow me to send what Amazon says I can send into the warehouse, right? And all of these changes inside the system can be applied to a single SKU. They can be applied to all products within the entire system. They can be applied per supplier and so on. So it's very customizable. All right. Let's do a new share. Okay, so there are a couple of guidelines for this min-max restocking, right? So there's basically some benefits, right? So you want to make sure that you've got, you know, enough buffer stock, and the buffer stock will act as your minimum. And then you want to make sure that you don't have too much maximum stock, right? You don't want to put so much stock in there that you have these high storage fees and that it, you know, impacts your excess inventory score and it impacts your sell-through rate. So what min-max restocking helps you to do is to optimize those inventory levels, to reduce your stock outs, right, with that buffer stock, to reduce those high storage fees with the max stock limit, and to systemize your reordering and your transferring so you can more easily delegate something like this to a VA. Okay, then there's the inventory timeline. I honestly think that the inventory timeline is somewhat of a game changer. And the reason that I like the inventory timeline so much is that it's something that a lot of people don't really like the numbers, right? They're not super keen on, you know, having to figure out what is happening with my inventory. You know, I'm being given a suggestion. I don't understand why I'm being given this suggestion. I think I should have stock, but it's saying I'm going to stock out. What is happening? So the inventory timeline is basically a running total of every day of your inventory for each SKU. What is going to happen with your inventory so that you can make proper decisions and really understand your inventory and when and why you need to transfer. So let's jump on in. I'm going to show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is the inventory timeline, right? We were looking at it a short while ago. It's going to show how much warehouse inventory you have, how much inventory you have at FBA, right? You can even see, you know, how much of that is available, how much of that is reserved. And then it's going to show the sales as they're being made based on your projections. And so how much inventory are you going to have available for each day as you get depleted, right? And we can see down here, then we start seeing transfers that need to be made, right? So these transfers are being made, and then we can see, you know, any orders that need to be made. Do orders need to be made? Do transfers need to be made? Is there going to be a stock out? It'll show you a stock out, and then you can figure out why that might be happening. How could you slow down your sales to prevent the stock out if it's a short-term stock out? That's something very, very helpful. And it'll also show you your blackout days. So these are the days that, for this particular supplier where that supplier is not working. So it's actually going to add extra time onto your calculation for reordering because there's a whole week in October where that factory shuts down for national holiday in China. So these are all things that can be factored in, and you can easily visualize up to an entire year's worth of sales and transfers and orders based on your calculations. And then any change that you make, so for example, if I came in here and I wanted to, you know, plan a lightning deal for the 12th, and I knew I was going to sell, say, you know, let's see, 200 units. What's going to happen when I do something like that? So you can actually see that if we put 200 units in here, it's going to drop my inventory by 200 units, and I'm going to have to transfer early, right? So I'm transferring so that I have enough inventory for that particular order, and then my inventory is lower. And then I will later on have to get more inventory, right? Sooner than I would have if I had not done that. So all of the ins and outs of your inventory planning are going to be showing up on this inventory timeline. It's one of my favorite things. Okay. Okay, so the benefits of the inventory timeline, you can track your inventory changes over time. You can visualize patterns. You can foresee stockouts. You can see when you need to place orders and place transfers. You can run your, you can get your running daily inventory count. And then you can also know when your inventory is going to be arriving. All right, so the thing that we're doing when we are doing an estimate of our orders and our transfers, that's something called simultaneous forecasting. So you need to keep in mind, if you are doing this on your own, you need to have forecasting happen simultaneously. So you need to know whether you need to place an order or if you can transfer from your third-party warehouse, right? Sometimes it's happening at the same time, and sometimes, you know, you have to do the transfer, but you also have to do an order, because if you don't do the order, which takes, say, 90 days versus the transfer taking, you know, 10 days or 15 days, if you don't do those things at the same time, then you're eventually going to run out of stock. So that's what the system is doing. It's simultaneously forecasting. Something to keep in mind, it's this, you know, little juggling act that, you know, you've always got to check your FBA stock and your overall stock, right? So if you're not keeping an eye on both of those things, it can get you into some trouble, because, you know, you place an order late and you're stocked out. We do forecast modeling. So forecast modeling is the concept of combining past sales history and future marketing plans. So that's really important to understand. There are a lot of systems out there that look at your past sales data, and they help you to calculate what you need based on your past data. And that's great. That's, you know, that's one part of the puzzle. But if you're not factoring in what you plan to do with that inventory, you could potentially stock out, right? We're very marketing minded as a community. And as a community, we tend to make a bunch of changes with our marketing. Some of those become very successful, but if we don't track them compared to our inventory, we could run out of stock unnecessarily. So we spent all this time and all this money and all this effort to market, and then we end up stocking out. So it's important to do what I call modeling, is to take that marketing plan, check it against your inventory, and model out and say, well, what if I did this? What if I did this, you know, coupon discount for you know, St. Patrick's Day, and see what happens to that. You go, okay, good, I could do that. Well, what if I did this other one for Easter? No, you're going to stock out if you do that for Easter. So make decisions based on actually running the scenarios. And that's what forecast modeling is. It's all about running the scenarios to see what would happen and see if it would be a good idea. Okay. So now we're getting into something that I like to call sync to scale. This is marketing, inventory, and cash flow all working together. A lot of the time we talk about scaling and we talk about cash flow and buying new products, but we don't talk about inventory enough, right? If you're having trouble with cash flow, you know, there could be a chance that you're not managing your inventory properly, right? And so basically we're trying to get marketing, inventory, and cash flow to all work together. So I like to say that a good marketing plan can turn bad fast when it's so successful that it stalks you out, right? So like I said, it's important to put your marketing into your inventory planning. Some common marketing stock out mistakes would be, you know, for example, running a PPC ad campaign that goes so well that it stocks you out. I've talked to lots of PPC agencies, and the majority of them have stocked out their clients because they don't coordinate inventory with them, right? So it's a very common thing to do. And that gets very expensive. Stocking out is an expensive proposition. We know stocking out is expensive. We know stocking out is expensive in that you lose sales, you have to airship to replenish, you have to then pay money to re-rank. But the things that no one is talking about is the amount of money that you spent to drive yourself into a stock out. So what I mean by that is that, you know, if you're paying a PPC agency and they're, driving all of this ad spend, especially if they get paid on ad spend, which is a weird way to do it, I think. If they get, they get all of this ad spend, you spend all of this money, you have less profit. Yeah, you're, driving up the rankings, but if you stock out, well, then you have to re-rank most of the time. So you have all of this ad spend that it costs you to go into that stock out, and you're paying your ad agency. It's a lot of money before you even get to the stock out to drive yourself into a stock out, and then all the money afterwards. So it's something to keep in mind that these things should be more coordinated. There's a lot within our community that is not coordinated regarding inventory and marketing. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do is, get some data from marketing, plug it into your inventory, see what's going to happen. And then on the other side of that is inventory should be sending data to marketing to say, here are all the products that are going to stock out. Here are all the products that are overstocked that you should push. We actually have inventory available, and we should be using that inventory as an asset, or it's going to be turned into a liability. And what I mean by that is that you've got inventory. It's potentially money, and it's money sitting there, and it's eventually going to potentially go negative, right? The more you have it on your books, the less and less you're making. Every single month, you're making less money on those units. So if you are having trouble with this product and it's not ranked properly, but you have a ton of inventory, doesn't it make sense to at least try to boost the sales and boost the ranking on that product to see if you can get it into a viable range if you have all this inventory sitting there? Otherwise, you either spend it trying to get ranking, or it's going to sit there and cost you fees. So it's something that the inventory team then should send these inventory reports to the marketing team. Slow moving products, overstocked products, send this data to the marketing team so that the marketing team can then start to try to recover some of that money, not just focus on the hero products, but try to recover money across the entire catalog. Okay. So yeah, so those are common marketing mistakes. Discount coupon codes emailed out one month and then stocking out the next month, right? Giving those discount coupon codes that you really didn't have to give. You could have done full priced sales and not stocked out. And that's a lot of money that you would have saved. Listing optimizations, that's another one. If you don't have enough money to, afford doubling your conversion, you don't know exactly how much of an increase you're going to get when you do a listing optimization. But let's say, for example, you get a 5% boost. Can you afford a 5% boost right now? If you can't, then what you'll want to do is you want to hold off on that listing optimization for that SKU until you get more inventory in stock, right? So vetting your inventory before implementing your marketing is extremely important. Okay. Inventory. So I'm just going to talk briefly about all of the things you need to be looking for to analyze whether you've got fully accurate inventory counts. All right, so you've got available inventory. Your available inventory is everything that is available and ready to go, ready to sell on Amazon. Then you have your reserve, but you have to minus out the customer orders. So reserved minus customer orders. That's anything that's not available for sale right now, but it's in Amazon's possession and they're moving it from one warehouse to the next. They're processing it in, there's fulfillment center or FC processing, there's FC transfers where they're moving it across the country. And all of that is considered reserve inventory. It should be available for sale very soon. Then you have inbound to Amazon. Inbound to Amazon is anything that you have an FBA shipment for that you're sending into Amazon, right? Then you have your warehouse inventory, your inbound to warehouse, and then anything that's in production or on order, right? Maybe it's on the boat, maybe it's still at your factory being produced, but all of that needs to be accounted for and it needs to fall somewhere on your timeline. So as we were looking at the timeline, we see that it was falling somewhere, all of those things were falling somewhere on our timeline. If we're not keeping track of all of those things, then we're going to get into a little bit of trouble. So that's very important. One of the things people ask is, where's my stuff, right? It's not just, forecasting. It's if you don't have, a good grasp on where all of these things are, then you're going to over, under, or order under because you've got something missing perhaps. So you need to have some sort of system. And we have this system here. It's a Kanban view, right? It's similar to Trello, like a Trello board, right? I've seen some people have been doing this in Trello. And it's just a way to track, you know, what the ETA is, you know, when is it supposed to arrive? When is it leaving production? You know, where's it coming from? Where's it going? You know, how is it traveling? This one's by ocean. This one's by ground freight. And then, you know, is it going to your warehouse or is it going to FBA, right? So where is your stuff, right? Where's your stuff? Are you tracking everything? Do you have a handle on where everything is and when it is arriving? That's extremely important for accuracy of a forecast. All right, and then cash flow. Cash flow is very much connected to your inventory and your ability to scale, right? So getting your inventory buttoned up, making sure that you're always in stock, but you're not overstocked, getting that balance right will help your cash flow, right? The ability to scale is directly proportionate to the intelligent utilization of capital. If I can turn my same $1,000, you know, three times in the next 3 months versus you turning it once in the next 3 months, I'm going to be able to scale and grow faster than you. So taking that same amount of money, how quickly can you turn it? So it's something to keep in mind. And why we don't like to over order, because basically that's just our money just sitting there costing us money. So very much connected, cash flow is very much connected with your inventory. All right, and then we get into the seller stock out cycle. So this is something that everyone saw. Amazon takes weeks to receive your inbound shipments. The product stocks out while waiting for Amazon to check in. You have 30 days worth of sales are now lower because of that stock out. And then you have a restock limit decrease due to those reduced sales. And then it becomes a vicious cycle. So one of the things that I advise for this, I think it's very important for us all to start having our own fulfillment center, having our own third-party warehousing. And that's not to say that you need to go open up your own building, but there are a lot of different companies out there that will do fulfillment for you. So basically it's have a backup plan, right? Amazon should not be your only distribution channel. What I mean by that is Amazon is a sales channel. They don't want to be a storage facility. So they've proven to us time and again that they don't want to be a storage facility. They've created these policies to show us that they don't want to be a storage facility, right? They're kicking us out of they're setting these limits. They're saying, we don't want to, to house all of your stuff anymore. So you have to have your own warehouse. But then also, we've seen how Amazon has had problems. They've taken forever to check things in. They've lost things. They've done all these things. And so if we send them all of our inventory, we basically are, giving our business over to them. And so if they are having trouble checking these things in, we can no longer send our inventory to the customers. So it's something to keep in mind. Find a really good fulfillment center. I have a list that I will send out at when I send out this replay. I have a list for you guys of fulfillment centers that were community sourced, but it's important to have one, even if you're not going to be using it right now. You have it as a backup, especially coming this coming Christmas. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if Amazon is going to enforce the same horrible policies that they did this past year, and so we need to be ready. If Amazon loses your inventory and it's all of the inventory you have, then you can't sell it. But if you have a fulfillment center and you have backup stock at a fulfillment center, then you can still use Amazon as your sales channel, even if they're not your distribution channel. So just keep that in mind. Amazon doesn't want to be a storage facility for you, and they should not be your only distribution channel, because you're basically, kind of giving yourself over to the growing pains of Amazon. All right, so we talked about create a distribution channel. Here's one other reason to create a distribution channel. So FBM sales help you to keep your restock limit up. So if you stock out, but you're stock out at FBA, but you're still fulfilling FBM orders, those FBM sales, Amazon is calculating them as part of your restock limit. So it helps you to maintain that restock limit so that even if you stock out at FBA, your restock levels don't plummet. So that's the other reason to keep that, that fulfillment center kind of in your back pocket, is that you don't get into that dwindling spiral of, you know, lower and lower restock limits due to stock out after stock out, right? I would recommend, if you're looking for a warehouse, I've got that list that I'm going to be sending out, but we also have on our YouTube channel, we have a warehousing webinar. It's a, you know, how not to get screwed by warehouses and fulfillment centers. Look that up, go to our YouTube channel. Basically, you go to YouTube, type in "so stocked" as one word. You'll find our channel and then search for the warehousing webinar. It's got a lot of good tips on how to pick a good warehouse. Because once you got your stuff there, it's expensive to move it. So you want to make sure that you've got a good warehouse, one that has good fees, one that, you know, calculates fees well. We talk in that webinar about some of the tricks and some of this, you know, kind of sneaky things that warehouses do in terms of how they calculate their fees. I've seen it firsthand. So it's myself and my friend who owns a warehouse talking on this, and how do you know that they're going to be around for the long haul? You know, there's a lot of warehouses that ended up, you know, basically going out of business. How do you know that they're going to be able to handle, you know, the inflow? How do you know they're going to be able to send out your inventory on time so that you don't stock out? All of those things are discussed inside of that warehousing webinar. All right, and then that's it. We've basically got any Amazon inventory solution. The things that you should be looking for is you should be removing your sales spikes, removing stockouts, factoring in lightning deals, projecting seasonality, tracking all of your orders and transfers, getting reorder alerts, and then managing your FBA, 3PL, and your on order shipments. Let me know if you have any questions, guys. SoStocked.com, we have, again, like I mentioned, the IPI limit, the new IPI limit for forecasting is being calculated. We are offering at $79 a month for life. That means no matter how big your business is, you'll be locked in at $79. We're going to be doing a tiered structure in the coming couple months. And what that will mean is that based on how many orders you have, the price will be increasing. So if you're looking for a solution, getting into SoStocked now tends to make more sense than say, you know, say 5 months from now, because we will be raising those prices. So got something in the chat. Let's check it out. Okay. Thank you for the awesome presentation. I will think about it and will purchase in these days. Fantastic. One question more. Let's see. On product inventory list, do you have SKU number? On the product, yes. So on the product inventory list, I didn't jump into it, but I can jump into it real quick. We have a whole section for tracking, right? Inventory tracking. So inventory tracking, you've got, let's see, here's ASIN, SKU. So you can turn these on, you can turn them off. You can move them around, and yeah, so you can do that, right? Everything, we've created a system that is very customizable. These particular, we call them dashboards, are all customizable. So you've got, you know, looking at inbound shipments, for example, or your inventory on hand, and it's going to give you all of these. But then you can also do what I did right here, which is create a liquidate section, right? Where you say, okay, I just want to see everything that's got less than 5 units a day in sales. And then you filter for that. And then you can come in and actually tag these, you know, for example, I want this to be called liquidate, right? And so you can use some tagging, but everything is customizable based on what you need to see. So everything, you can filter it, you can remove columns, you can group by certain things. This one's grouped by warehouse levels. So yeah, and then we work a lot with our sellers. We do custom onboarding. So once you get signed up, you'll go through this little setup guide here. And then once you go through the setup guide, you will then book a call with one of our team members who will then help walk you through the software, answer any questions that you have, you know, maybe give you some tips on best practices for your particular business. So all of that is part of our onboarding process. And then any feedback you have, any ideas, oh, you know, it's great, but I wish it did this, you know, it's great, but I wish that we had that feature. Those go on a list and then we push those out. We do a lot of custom development. We're in development mode. We've doubled our development team. So there will be a lot of things being pushed out to the software very shortly. All right, thank you guys so much for coming. If you have any questions, reach out. You can reach out to us. Oh, and what about data safety? Yes, data safety. So Amazon requires of every seller that works with the API specific safety and security measures to be put in place. We have what Amazon requires and more. We have the same safety measures that the Thomason team has been using for many, many years and have not had a breach. So the safety of the data is one of our utmost concerns. We know this is very valuable information, and we have many different processes to protect the data. All right, thanks so much for coming, guys. And yeah, reach out if you have any questions. You can reach out at helpme@sostocked.com, and looking forward to connecting with you guys soon. All right.